2023 was a hell of a year where I personally played over 50 games and I watched dozens more as Let's Plays. These are my top 10 games that I played this year. These are the cream of the crop, games that far exceeded my expectations upon purchase and left me wishing the next game was out already. While the top 9 games are not in any particular order, the number 1 game is absolutely my personal game of the year choice. I will also link the playlist of any games that I streamed or did a Let's Play for in the description. Alright, let's go. Starting out on the highest of high notes, Baldur's Gate 3 is an incredible game. In another year, I could see this being my game of the year, easily. It's funny, I saw the game pop up on my Steam recommendations when it first dropped all the way back in like 2020. I looked at it, saw it was basically one chapter and opted out. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad I did because I got to experience the entire game with fresh eyes full of wonder, but thinking back, I wonder how I would have liked it in those early days when a certain virus was in full swing and we were all effectively hikikomori living in our homes trying not to die or kill others. I feel like the heartbreak of not being able to leave Chapter 1 would have been too much for me, and being the kind of gamer that I am, I may never have gone back for the full version. I feel like anyone watching this video already knows BG3 pretty well since it won Game of the Year, and if it wasn't for you, that's fine. Not everyone likes turn-based, text-heavy RPGs, but for those of us who do love those kinds of games, or at the very least can get past it, an amazing, self-expressive story where you can do just about anything to anyone at any time. A robust class and magic system, and effectively a tight-knit D&D campaign prepared for almost any contingency awaits. If money is an issue for you, and believe me, I get that, eventually BG3 will go on sale as most Lithuanian games do once the Giga hype dies down. So I hope you get to try out this masterpiece soon for yourself. With its lack of microtransactions or day 1 DLC, BG3 is absolutely a 10 out of 10 game and has hopefully reshaped the gaming landscape for the better. As a gigantic fan of horror games, the Dead Space Remake delivers exactly what it promises. It's a remake of Dead Space. This may sound obvious, but most of the time when a game is remade, they make changes or fine-tune the experience. And while there are certainly some quality of life improvements, the game itself is exactly how I remember it. It's gory, it's atmospheric, it's scary as hell, and fairly difficult, especially on the first playthrough. In it, you play as Isaac Clarke, a space repairman who was called to help with a distress signal from a particular ship in deep space where his lady love, Nicole, was working. Almost immediately upon arrival, the rescue crew is attacked by mysterious grotesque beings, which we quickly learn are mutations of the old crew. From there, it's up to Isaac to cut, burn, saw, and stomp his way through a seemingly infinite number of enemies to try to find his lady, while unraveling the work of the Church of Unitologists and the true nature of the horrors that he has discovered. What sets Dead Space apart from other games is how it works the over-the-top gore into the mechanics of the combat, as most enemies can't be killed with headshots but must be dismembered. The strength is also a weakness, as while there's a large weapon variety to suit most playstyles, the starting pistol ends up being the best weapon in the game due to the way it fires. The biggest flaw with the game is that it is a faithful remake. While it renders the original Dead Space completely obsolete, it also keeps the game's major flaws, including the final hour or so of the game, which is a slow slog through a bland environment fighting the same enemies you've killed a billion times by that point. Outside of this problem, which affects about 10% of the game, the Dead Space remake should absolutely enthrall any horror fan, or just someone looking for something to shoot. I'd give it an 8 out of 10, and hopefully they remake Dead Space 2 and 3 eventually in the same way, but maybe leave open an opportunity for Dead Space 4. I actually reviewed Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince on my channel. You can find a link in the description below, and I rated it an 8 out of 10, and it's a well-deserved score. Dragon Quest Monsters franchise has been long dormant in America, but 2023 saw a massive resurgence in monster collecting games. In a year where the company has disappointed many people, from the polarizing gameplay of Final Fantasy XVI to the shutting down of Final Fantasy Record Keeper, they managed to get one thing extremely right. With over 500 monsters to collect, all of which can be made viable for the long game, a robust fusion system, and a game that feels both totally casually friendly yet made for the hardcore gamers, there's something for everyone in this turn-based RPG. Even the story feels important, which is rare for a Dragon Quest Monsters game, as it directly ties into Dragon Quest IV and makes that world seem all the larger, while also proving they can still expand on previous games in the franchise without actually intruding on them. If you're into monster collecting, turn-based battles, or just looking for something to chill with for an hour or so a day, I cannot recommend The Dark Prince enough. Another heavy contender for Game of the Year, Hi-Fi Rush is one of the best experiences you can have for the price tag. The game shadow dropped back in January and was available day 1 on Game Pass. It's a generic thing to say, but I love music. If I was capable of focusing on multiple things at once, I would likely have music going every waking moment of my life, but unfortunately, that's just not the case for me. An action game built around music, however, is exactly my kind of jam. You probably noticed the majority of my list is either RPGs or horror games because those are my niches I choose to stick to for my sanity, and also happen to be my favorite. So for an action style game like this to catch my eye is extremely rare. With both Nine Inch Nails and The Prodigy on the soundtrack, as well as a host of other talented artists, the game is already a freaking good ass time for anyone to pick up and mash out. However, they went a step further and actually composed an entirely original soundtrack for streamers and YouTubers to be able to share the game with their audiences without getting copyright striked, which was an impressive and much beloved move. With lovable and vibrant characters and locations, constantly evolving gameplay, and a banger soundtrack combined with the rhythm-based combat and loads of secrets and upgrades to find, Hi-Fi Rush is both the 10-hour beat-em-up of your dreams or the 100-hour speedrun game of your fantasies. Give it a try. Absolutely a 10 out of 10 from me. I do not know how or why Killer Frequency caught my eye. I think it was on my Steam recommendations list. I honestly don't remember. But holy crap, am I glad that I found it. Killer Frequency takes place in the 80s and puts you in the shoes of Forrest Nash, a once nationally famous radio host with millions of listeners who has fallen down to being a late-night talk show radio host in a small town with a listener base in the double digits. 1 week into his new tenure, he gets a call from a local 911 operator who informs Forrest that the town sheriff, of which there is one, is dead and all outside communication has been cut off. While she drives 3 hours both ways to the nearest town for help, Forrest must team up with his producer Peggy and field the 911 calls while also handling his DJ job. What follows is a roller coaster ride of hints, betrayals, and a tragic story of murder and revenge that spans over a decade. With everyone hiding secrets and a killer on the loose, can you help the locals survive the night? As a game, Killer Frequency is actually a very rounded out 8 out of 10, but within its own genre and niche, I can easily award it a 10 out of 10. It is by far one of the best narratively driven puzzle games you will ever play. To those in the know, 2023 was the year of FNAF. In addition to 2 games, 4 books, and a movie, many long lingering questions were answered and the next chapter of the popular Five Nights at Freddy's franchise has begun. Security Breach itself came out in 2021, but this year we finally got the much anticipated free DLC, which was pretty much the single best FNAF game ever made, aptly named Ruin. In the story, you play as Cassie and roam around the now dilapidated Pizzaplex in search of the original game's player character Gregory. What follows is a shockingly competent game with far fewer bugs than you would expect, though they still exist. Steel Wool is slowly taking the now nearly decade-old franchise and making it their own, fleshing out the gameplay and characters far more than ever before while still keeping that almost Dark Souls-style hidden storyline that is ripe for theorizing and speculation. And retcons. This is probably a spicy pick for a top 10 game of the year list, and if it was just Ruin, I would give it a pat on the back and put a runner up here instead. However, I also wanted to lump in Help Wanted 2, which totally changes the game. I do not own a VR headset and thus could not play the game for myself, but after watching 2 different Let's Players, Matt Pat and Markiplier, play through it, I can tell that while Ruin is the best FNAF game I have played, Help Wanted 2 is probably the best FNAF game bar none. And as a self-loathing fan of the franchise, I'd be lying if I didn't put it on this list. I love this dumbass franchise a lot, and always look forward to the next release. And Ruin combined with Help Wanted 2 give me more hope for the future of the franchise's games than ever before. Keep it up, Steel Wool, and hire some more playtesters. Ruin gets a 7 out of 10, and Help Wanted gets a 9 out of 10. Next on the list is Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising. When I was in my late teens, early 20s, I would connect with dial-up connection and play Street Fighter III Third Strike and Capcom vs. SNK 2. I've played most major fighting games as time moved forward. Ever since my early 20s, I dreamed of being on the big stage at EVO. It's never gonna happen though, and after playing about 2 hours of Street Fighter V and finding out how bad MVC Infinite was, I hung up my fight stick. I tried Guilty Gear Strive and DNF Duel, and neither of them really called me back to the community. Then in 2023, Capcom unveiled Street Fighter VI, a new game with amazing visuals and style as well as music. I played in 1 or 2 of the betas and knew it'd be a day one purchase for me, which I did. I put dozens of hours into it, and the game never got any support. So far, it's seen 2 new characters, but the game still has tons of bugs in the gameplay, and half a year later has seen neither balance patch nor any sort of major update outside of Battle Pass garbage. That was a lot of talking about a game that didn't make the list, but it's important to know my history with fighting games to understand why Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising did. Granblue is basically everything someone could want in a fighting game. Is it perfect? Hell no. Nier is busted to hell. I have never ever had a fighting game where I wanted to learn multiple cast members and I can be entertained just going into the training mode and practicing. Hell, I haven't even touched the story mode or the Fall Guys mode yet. I just play ranked in casual matches because the game is just a joy. I can lose 5 or 10 games in a row, and unlike in a game like Street Fighter 6 where losing feels really bad, I can always pinpoint exactly where and why I lost any match in Granblue. It's very rare for me to just genuinely enjoy playing a fighting game with no strings attached, and where Street Fighter 6 has already grown stale and dull, Granblue has picked up the slack and promised 6 new characters within its first year, as well as balance patches, and with the announcement of 2B, potentially some sick crossovers. If you like playing fighting games in any capacity, you should already be playing this. It is a niche genre for sure, but I feel like this will be the best fighting game until Project L comes out in a few years, unless Capcom really picks up the pace in their support for Street Fighter 6. Combining all that praise with the fact that Granblue Fantasy is a free-to-play, with Gran permanently being playable on a rotating list of 3 other fighters to pick from if you don't want to actually buy the game itself yet, it's like a 9 out of 10. This freaking game, no, this world. Alan Wake 2 has been talked about for a good bit, and honestly I hadn't been keeping up. I know Control won Game of the Year a few years back for IGN, and I literally did not care. Wasn't really the type of game I was into. I had played Alan Wake way back when it first came out, and that was the end of my adventures with the internationally acclaimed novelist until Alan Wake 2 slowly started to work its way into the public eye, and thus mine. During my fondness of the original, I decided I would absolutely crack it open, and holy crap did it deliver in ways I did not even expect. First off, if we remove everything about the game and just judge the gameplay, Alan Wake 2 is a 6 out of 10. It's fine, very playable, but it's not about that. Alan Wake 2 is a work of art, which is fitting since that's the core and soul of the game's story. You take control of Saga and Alan, alternating basically as you see fit and investigating both the town of Bright Falls, Washington and the Dark Place as Saga tries to solve a series of mysterious homicides, and Alan continues his now decade-long fight to escape his nightmarish hellscape of, to some extent, his own making. The story is trippy. There are musical numbers, tons of collectibles to find, inside jokes, fantastic characters. I could go on and on. If the gameplay itself were more fun, I could easily give this game a 15 out of 10. Alas, while the gunplay is tight and feels good, the lack of enemy types and the fact there's only like 1 or 2 memorable bosses hold it back. But if you like horror, avant-garde art, or just absolutely batshit crazy storytelling that feels like there's no way it could possibly make sense, but then it does, grab Alan Wake 2 and buckle up. The game is so good that I went back and played Control using the PlayStation Plus package, which comes with all the DLC, and just because I could see the tie-ins to Alan Wake, I love the hell out of it. As an old school gamer, Sea of Stars is exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for sometimes. In it, you play as 2 Solstice warriors trying to save the world from some big bads. I mean, it's a JRPG. That's what it does. But what follows is a mind-bending tale that not only includes an infinite amount of multiverses and complexity, but will also tug every heartstring you have and leave you in awe if you played another game by the same developer, The Messenger. Somehow, this old-school Ninja Gaiden-style platformer is completely and intricately tied into this other Chrono Trigger / Mario RPG-inspired turn-based RPG. Sea of Stars was so good that, much like Alan Wake 2, it made me play another game of a completely different genre just to get more context to the story itself. It's phenomenal. But even beyond the god tier writing, the game is just fun. With Mario RPG's timed attacks and dual attacks a la Chrono Trigger, monsters you can see on the screen before you enter combat, a well-balanced leveling progression that never leaves you feeling like you need to grind, and outstanding and unique characters that you can hot swap between mid-battle, Sea of Stars will scratch both your childlike wonder itch along with your nostalgia itch if you grew up in the 90s. The game is very much a 10 out of 10 indie game, and even in the larger gaming space when put head-to-head against AAA juggernauts, it stands at a 9 out of 10. Play Sea of Stars in The Messenger, so that when the next game comes out in the greater universe, you'll be ready to go in hard. Oh, and The Messenger is also an 8 out of 10. I'm lumping these two together for the purposes of this list. And thus, my friends, we arrive at the big one, Lofter's Game of the Year. This is it. Resident Evil is far and away my favorite franchise in gaming. I love the story, I love the gameplay. I love how it hot swaps between a campy, almost badly written horror game to a highly competently written horror cornucopia every couple of minutes. I love how Leon can say the worst one-liners ever and Chris can punch boulders while Ethan runs for his life from werewolves and vampires that, had you told me, would be in the franchise decades ago when I was a teenager playing Resident Evil Director's Cut on the original PlayStation, I would be like, what the hell are you on about? The caveat of all this is there are some Resident Evil games that I do not like. Of them, 2 stand out above the rest: Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 4. That's right, the hardcore Resident Evil fanboy who loves the franchise with his entire heart and has a giant $700 tattoo of Resident Evil Village on his arm did not like what most consider to be the single best game in the series. I did not like the gunplay. I did not like the environments. I did not like how much it deviated from the first 3 games of the franchise, and I did not like dealing with Ashley. And now, Resident Evil 4 Remake is quite definitively my favorite game in the franchise. Literally every single complaint I had about the original game is fixed. The gunplay is clean as hell and feels rewarding. They made Ashley much more tolerable and cool. Leon's one-liners are said with such confidence that if you aren't really paying attention, you won't even realize he said something cheesy. The way the collectibles are hidden and reward you, the pacing of the side quests, how big the monsters can get, the game gets better and better the more you play it. I've never in my life wanted to get an S+ ranking in a Resident Evil game. It's just not my style. I'm a one and done kind of guy. But between the base game and the Ada Wong DLC, where they moved all of the content we thought they cut, I have put 75 freaking hours into this 12-hour game, which is unprecedented for me. I put more time into this survival horror game than I put into most long-form JRPGs. And I loved every second of it. If it weren't for how hard 2023 hit me with amazing games across the board, I would have probably kept going and learned the S+ Ada scenario as well, but unfortunately, there's still a lot more games to play. Lies of P calls, and I gotta get it done before February. As we wrap up this journey through my top 10 games of 2023, it's clear that this year has been nothing short of a roller coaster in the gaming world. From the eerie corridors of Dead Space to the rhythmic beats of Hi-Fi Rush, each game has not only entertained but also pushed the boundaries of storytelling, gameplay, and artistic expression. What stands out the most is how these games, each in their own way, have reshaped our understanding of what gaming can be, a fusion of art, narrative, and interactive experiences. Reflecting on this past year, I'm reminded that gaming is more than just a pastime. It's a vibrant culture, a community of shared experiences, and a canvas for creative expression. As we look forward to 2024, I'm excited about the new adventures that await and stories yet to be told, and the experiences we'll all share. Thank you for joining me on this journey, for sharing your thoughts, your favorite games, and for being part of this incredible gaming community. Here's to another year of great games, and remember, whether you're a hardcore gamer or just looking for some casual fun, there's always a new world waiting for you at the press of a button. Keep gaming, exploring those horizons, and let's embrace whatever 2024 has in store for us. Until next time, game on and deuces dummies.
Whose blood are you here for this time?
That all depends on you.